I am very intrigued by concrete dry pours, where instead of mixing a bag with water first, then pouring, then doing all of your finish work, you instead throw the dry contents down, then finish it, then add water. It seems insane and like it shouldn't work. However, tons and tons of people have now tried it and documented how after years of use, it's still holding up. So I decided to try it myself. I am actually on the tail end of developing a 10-acre RV park here in the hill country, and I want a slab for right outside of what will be the public showers. Crucial point here, the slab is only going to be for foot traffic. So nobody's going to be driving on it, equipment's not going to be parked on it, it's just simply people walking and standing. I started my job like any other concrete job, which was to create a form. I'm aiming for a 4-inch slab, so my form is from 2x4s. After the slab is dry, I'll next be building a simple porch. So I marked off where the post will land for this planned porch and started by digging out a few more inches to create footers. You can see my markings in orange paint. I made sure to dig out wider and deeper so that the concrete will be stronger to accommodate the weight of the post. I have 4 total, and you can stay tuned for the next video if you're interested in a porch build. Well, I say, that's a mighty fine looking footer. Next was to start moving in the concrete. And honestly, for a hard part, it was easier than it typically is. I invested in a 3-bag mixer years ago since I do so many projects. So I'm used to not only having to carry the bag, 80 pounds, but then holding it while ripping it open and pouring it in. At least with the dry pour, it was nice to just tote it over, then drop it. The idea is to build up roughly half of the depth first. Then I'll put down the metal reinforcement, then fill up the rest. Jacob and I got into a groove where I would rip and spread while he carried more in. I'm using a metal rake for spreading. Don't skip the respirator, and if I would have thought more about it that morning, it's also a pants sort of job. Things don't have to be perfectly level, but it's easy to get it close. Next come in the metal panels. The 2 options for this are meshing like this or rebar. And I actually used a combination of both. You want roughly a 2-inch gap around the perimeter. So one panel for me ended up working perfectly for my slab size. I overlapped them by a row or 2. Then I placed rebar at the very front and the very back. This not only weighs down the edges, but it also reinforces the front where those footers will be. I quickly went through and tied everything together. You can buy a simple swirling tool that makes this go really quick. Note that since I'm building this against an existing slab, we're using rebar sticking out from the side of the existing slab that will extend into this new slab, which will connect it. Now we can move in the rest of the concrete and fill it up so that I can knock it down level with the form. The leveling process is called screeding. You need a straight edge and then 2 reference points to move the straight edge back and forth on. In lots of cases, you can screed by using the form itself as your front and back reference. However, in my case, the width of this thing is 28 feet, which is way too long for screeding that direction. So because this is 28 feet, instead of trying to screed it lengthwise, which would be pretty silly, we're going this way. And so this angle iron is acting as the back reference. It's acting as the back reference for the screed board so that we can make a sawing motion on the shortest distance. And then we're gonna pull it out and then just fill in the little track on where it's at. Now, to make this trick work, the top of the angle iron needs to be leveled with the top of the form. Well, actually in my case, I wanted a 1-inch slope on my slab, so the angle iron is roughly 1 inch higher than the very top. And this is gonna move water away from my building. Back when forming up the form, we drove in some wooden stakes in the ground near the back edge of the slab. Then cut these stakes to the height so that the angle iron could rest on top and come out to the level I need. Another option is use pipe. I actually did a project back in 2016 where I used 1-inch metal conduit. So I'll link that video and timestamp in case that works better for your scenario. Then I just worked my way from one end of the form to the other. This is a simple process, but it is tiring, and I found it easiest to set. Man, do I wish I had pants. You don't need to tell me, folks. I ended up posing off at 3 different points throughout, then had a crazy moisturize for 2 days. But that's all right. All right. This is not a fast process, it's not a fun process, but what have we figured out in the first bit is if you drag it, screed too quickly, the aggregate is gonna come to the surface and like be dragged across. So what we have figured out to be the trick is really short, small movements in order to get the nicest smooth surface. When I got to the end of the length of angle iron, Jacob and I carefully pulled it out, trying to disturb the area as little as possible.
Got it.
Okay. Then we moved it down and repeated on the next section. I would screed while Jacob then filled in the angle iron trench. He found it best to use a trowel to get the desired finish. And it's funny because even dry, concrete has very similar tendencies as it does when wet. You just don't have that mad dash to do everything perfect before it dries. Another tip I can give you is they make bags of the sand powder portion called Portland cement. I would have picked up a bag had I known it would be useful. However, I didn't, so I ended up screening my own mixture by poking a few holes in the bottom of a bottle, then using it like a shaker. This worked perfectly to fill in any of those small pockets that wouldn't screed out nicely. After getting it screed with the 2x4, a tip everybody online gives is to use a dry paintbrush roller on a stick. And this does work well on smoothing out slight ridges left behind from screeding. But note, it also fluffs up the sand and brings it to the surface. The final texture of my finished slab turned out very sandy, which I actually don't mind one bit. But if you would, don't use a roller. If you want a smooth finish, I would recommend leaving it at screeding it with a 2x4 or using a trowel. Moving on to the finishing touches. Don't forget your mark. My park's name is Pierced Oak, so I wanted to leave an AW marker for any fans that would visit and know what to look for.
Okay.
For rounding the edges, the big difference here between wet and dry is that on wet, you can kind of shuffle the tool down to create the curve. On dry, it just blows out the powder. I found it best to press it into the surface instead, and pick it straight up and repeat a little bit further down. Same with cutting in the expansion joints. If you shuffle it along, it opens up pockets on the surface, so just press it in. And this, folks, is the final look at the slab before I have put any moisture on it. I thought it was insane. So many people stopped in and nobody believed me when I said it was 100% dry still. Now, the trick for getting it wet without ruining it is to mist it. You want to do a very light mist where you start the crystallization process of the topmost layer of the concrete, but you don't want to leave water impressions. Everybody recommends to use the mist setting on the nozzle, but I'm on an active job site and was struggling with the setup for temporary water and getting enough good pressure. I ended up using the cone setting, but to compensate, I pointed the nozzle up so that it would really spread the droplets around and it still end up as a mist once it hit the concrete. I would recommend to take your time, as it's better to go slow and not ruin your hard work. I lightly sprayed it and then I let it sit for an hour, then repeated the exact same process with just another light misting coat. And it's very easy to see when the slab starts drying out. After the second misting, they say the surface should be hard enough to do a shower and really start drenching the slab. Now, my second misting ended at the end of a work day, so my first shower pour actually happened the next day, so my slab had all night to sit after the 2 coats of misting. I confirmed that the surface wasn't being marred, then went to town until I saw the water start running off instead of soaking in. I would wait an hour in between, then repeat. In total, I gave the slab 7 good showers throughout the day. I was really nervous about taking the form off too quickly. So I let it sit over a weekend, which gave it 3 days to sit there and think about being a good slab. And I guess that was the right amount of time because when I pulled the form off, it was amazing. Man, that's a lot smoother than I was expecting with no vibrating it. I was really curious about how well it would compact without being vibrated. I was also curious if the bottom layers would be solid. I was also curious if the edges would break off when I stood on it and started building on it. But as you can see, it is very well compacted. The bottom layers are solid, and I can go ahead and fast forward some in real-time progress and let you know that even after building a porch on it, I haven't found any flaws. Of course, time will be the real test here, so I'll follow up with you guys in a year and 2 years to see see what it does. Now that you see the progress, let me give you my takeaway. 1, overall, I think this is a great method for a DIY slab. That's gonna be for something light duty, something with foot traffic only, maybe a chicken coop, maybe even a light, simple sitting area porch. I love how it takes out the urgency of that mad dash to get everything perfectly finished while doing a wet pour. I'm not a concrete person. People who do this day in and day out, of course they can do it in the time restriction, but not me. I do concrete maybe once a year. So having that ability to really take my time with the finishing and get it perfect, I definitely think it's a plus. Now the trade-off is that it's super dusty. However, to offset that, a respirator and long pants. Now truthfully, this slab was too big to do a dry pour on, but I knew that going into it, but I really wanted to try it and I don't need another slab. So just know that if you have a DIY slab, there is a size in which it makes sense to do a dry pour or to just hire a truck. They come and dump the wet pour for you and then you take it from there. And then finally, know that I would not have been brave enough to do this on my own if I had not seen tons of testimonies from people with years of results to show me that it actually contradicts what I would have thought otherwise. I don't have years of results yet to share with you. So if you're thinking about doing a DIY dry pour slab, then check out some of the other videos where people can show you the results and then you can make up your own mind about it. Alrighty, and I think that's it for this one. Leave me your questions, comments down below. If you're interested in a porch build, then that's gonna be coming up next. And then if you're interested in my latest venture, this RV park, then I'm gonna have tons of videos coming out leading up to it opening later this year. I'll see you soon.